Most of you know that it is thanks to the love and support of this community that we have been able to build a village for special needs children living in crisis out in Tanzania. This village is home to nearly 200 children, all of which had nowhere to call a family home and nowhere to live a quality life as they do now. This year we've been very blessed. We have not had to do a single fundraiser, thanks to all of the support from our partners and all of the support from one-time donations from the community. However, right now we are facing a problem. During the pandemic, we had economic turmoil and we had to sell one of our four-wheel drives to be able to survive 1 month with our food bills, etc. We are cooking over 1,000 meals a day and it's not straightforward to provide for all those children. That has left us with a great struggle with transport. We use our four-wheel drives to go onto outreach and to find the children who are living in terrible conditions. Some of them tied up, some of them locked away in the dark, others who recently we shared footage of a child who was meowing like a cat because they had never had human interaction and only interacted with the cat that was coming into the room. Our four-wheel drive at present is 35 years old. It's going strong, but it is under daily use and intense use. Our people carrier is also quite old by now, and that is being used every day to bring children to school and also to hospital. We have another small four-wheel drive that we are using on outreach also, but it is small and it is not as strong and it cannot transport special needs children and wheelchairs. What we have decided to do is to start a fundraiser to first of all buy a minivan that has a wheelchair accessible lift. We can import this van and ensure that we can take our children safely to the local hospital without having to tie wheelchairs to the roof of the car. We also need another four-wheel drive, something strong and robust with 7 seats that can handle the off-road tracks of Tanzania whilst we look for these children and to replace the one that we did lose. The last months we've spent a lot on maintenance on our vehicles because they are being used so heavily and often in ways that they should not be. There is a fundraising page for these vehicles, so if you'd like to find out more or if you'd like to do some fundraising, then please visit the address at the bottom of the screen and the link will be in the description box of this video. Thank you for the love and support. We couldn't have done any of this without you, and as I say, we were blessed this year. Not one fundraiser was needed until now, and that's a testimony to the love and support of this community alone. God bless, guys. Thank you for everything. Bye. For thousands of years, humanity has been under an immense spiritual assault, a demonic attack. And right now, this collective attack of our species has been focused around, once again, Palestine and Israel. Now, I know for many of you, you are going to have an emotional investment and attachment to one side or the other of this story. But I am going to cut through everything that these religions are saying and doing and go for the head of the snake. And I am going to show you that there were profoundly wise, compassionate and intelligent forces that encoded inside the scripture of each of those religions the causality of what we are seeing play out in Gaza and Israel at this time. Before I go any further with that, I want to remind you all of something profoundly important. And it's very simple, and yet it is being used by Satan immensely inside this world. When you use a word like Satan, it's important to see that the human being who is speaking is using a word to point at reality, and that reality is beyond thought and words. If we do not see that words are pointing at reality and therefore look to find out where it is this word is being used to point me toward, what happens is you hear the word and all of your own personal beliefs, images, thoughts and feelings around the word are triggered inside of you. And you, as awareness, see, instead of what the word is pointing at, the manifestation inside of you of your own beliefs and thoughts around the word. And your view of the word might be different to how I am using it and pointing at reality with that word. This is very important. And the reason it's so important you can see playing out. These members of Hamas have somehow managed to, in the craziness of seeing only your own thoughts and images, not recognize the reality beyond them, the notion that a loving, compassionate God that is clearly asking us to be tolerant and compassionate and forgiving. They believe that a loving God wants them to murder and rape. This is what happens when human beings see their own collective delusion. Those who follow Islam are told that Yeshua was indeed a messenger of God. They don't say he was the Son of God, but they are told that they should follow what he taught. There is no way to follow the revelation and teaching of Yeshua and believe that it is God that wants you to rape, murder, kidnap, and cause genocide. Likewise, it's impossible to follow that teaching and believe that a loving God wants you to bomb and destroy innocent lives. Now, this topic is complex and complicated. And so I ask you, before your emotions come up and you want to argue and bring all of this dualistic points of view around the topic, to bear with me while I get to this truth that is in the Torah, that is in the Quran, that is in the Bible, that was hidden within there to show humanity the simplicity of targeting the head of the snake of this endless conflict that is going on. You likely don't need me to tell you that Hamas has attacked Israel. This attack was brutal and terrifying, and people have been murdered, massacred, raped, kidnapped, man, woman and child. The response of Israel, of course, is to fight back. This may be hidden under the image of God and religion, but those men who enacted those atrocities are merely pawns who have been deceived by Satan, for they were unable to let go of their hatred. They were unable to spiritually mature. You cannot at all say that it's not satanic. Those who celebrate people dying in fear and terror, those who celebrate people being harmed and burned alive, and all of these reports we are getting of this horrendous way to end a human life. If you feel that Palestine was oppressed or not, your applause of that behavior is simply an applause of Satan. And the wider reality beyond your dualistic prison that these coded scriptures try to bring you free of is simply you adorning the author of these works, which is not God. It's not the love of God, it's Satan. The leader of Iran said, "I kiss the hand of those who planned these attacks." That means that the leader of Iran is not a Muslim. He kisses the hand of Satan. There is no way the one true God, the creator of all things that is filled with compassion and love, would say that this is his will. When you look at this situation, the whole thing is being born off the back of these scriptures. It matters that we understand why all of this is happening. It matters that we understand that if you use words, it doesn't mean that you are with God. If you say, "I am born again with Christ," and then you have nothing of the fruits of that spirit that you are supposed to hold, you are not. If you say, "I am a servant of the loving God Allah," and yet you want to rape someone and say, "This is it, this is my loving God," you lack revelation, you lack unity with your God. Now, I don't know the solution in the immediate sense, but I do know the long-term problem will continue to persist unless we look at what these ancient loving forces put into our scriptures for us to see. And they hid it in there because they knew that humanity and its dualism would have simply destroyed those that were doing it. For it requires a mystic stance, it requires an honest unity with God to be able to see it. I don't know how on earth they get out of where they are, but I do know the true, only end solution. Even we, in our children's village, Israel has an iron dome. We have Maasai warriors. They are our iron dome against this perverse dark religion that wants to sacrifice our children. I understand that defense is there, but I also know, for all I don't necessarily know today, how it is that we bring this into the lives of Israelis and into the lives of Jews and into the lives of Muslims, into the lives of Christians. I do know that it's God's hope that we finally do bring it somehow. And we finally, as a species, wake up to the fact that we are living in these fallen bodies, in this fallen world, and we are presenting ourselves as servants of God, but are often living as a servant of the enemy. To understand what I am about to say, you have to understand something. We are humanity. A human that is adopting the belief of Islam or the belief of Christianity or the belief of Judaism is humanity. And if that human is sick in a hospital, the same attributes are present and the same treatment is offered. And when a human is spiritually sick, the same goes and the same treatment is offered. But the problem we face is that people are not willing, because it takes great energy to explore the notion that perhaps we have gotten it wrong for a very long time, or perhaps there is more to it, especially if your very identity is Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. It's your existence. How can someone tell you that you've got it wrong or that you didn't see something? Satan locks it away with that lock and key of arrogance and pride, the original sin, whereby people cannot self-investigate and see if indeed it is true that this code is there and what it leads us to, the freedom, the compassion, the transformed being that couldn't possibly rape or murder because they have been transformed in the presence of the divine will. A story that connects all of these faiths is the story of Moses. Many of you will want to understand the history, the politics, let us look at this first. The story of Moses is deemed to be a purely historical text. but it's also a mystical text. A mystical text that provides you a map, and the simple map of how humanity ensures that conflicts like this become obsolete. How we ensure that people are not oppressed, people are not stolen from, and that compassion, that wonderful compassion that nothing in the world beats, compassion that sits high above all things, it ensures that we transform into a being whereby the flesh, as Jesus called it, is not our master, but the compassion of the divine will of the Spirit is our master. Not through training the brain alone, but through a transformation, almost a supernatural, we may call it, transformation. In the story of Moses, it's speaking about the human anatomy. We can start with Moses in the wilderness. We are all born into a wilderness of great confusion in this world. And inside this fallen world, where, as Jesus said, the ruler of this world, the God of this world is Satan. This power, this force relies on humanity not understanding where and what it is. If we look and say we are merely a body and a mind, then Satan has us. If we look and we recognize that we are a soul, and that soul awareness has divinity because of where it is from, there we begin to be able to ensure that the will of that divinity, the will of our Creator, is present in our attitudes and actions, meaning that the soul awareness that you are becomes the master of the flesh, rather than the flesh and the mind being the master of the true you. When you look at this story, you have to understand that the mystics had different understanding of the human body, which is the temple of God. We wander in the wilderness, and what happens to Moses? He then finds 7 sisters. The 7 is common and frequent, and I'll show you where it is inside other elements of the Quran, the Bible, etc. The 7 represents unity over the flesh of the 7 energy centers, or the 7 endocrine glands of the temple of God, the human body. The temple of God has 7 endocrine glands, and the image of the 7 in these mystic texts denoted that we as human beings are not governed by the temple and its impulses, as it has been hacked, as it were. It has fallen due to Satan's ways and Satan's pollution upon it. But we have dominion. We unite, and the body is our friend, not our master. After he finds the 7 sisters, Moses also has to receive revelation later in the story. Before you understand how revelation comes, you must have that unity. So let us shorten this. He then goes to the Pharaoh with a staff. Those men in Hamas who committed these atrocities, these horrendous, brutal, demonic behaviors, they were governed by, in the story of Moses, Egypt. Egypt is the lower self, the lower nature. Jesus called it the flesh. The Pharaoh is the ego, the selfish self-will, the personal meanness and the personal history that wishes to sit in the throne of your life instead of the will of God. And so the Pharaoh is also that arrogant ego that cannot forgive, it cannot love as it should. And the Egypt is the lower state, the lower mind, the perversion of the human, the flesh. Moses is the soul awareness that is calling the human life, the Israelite, out of the bondage of the lower nature. Moses comes to the Pharaoh with a staff. This staff is leading you back towards the notion of the 7, such as the 7 sisters. Unity with the 7 energy centers, meaning when you live for the will of God, you do not burn up the soul essence, your vitality, in worldly desire and purely selfish desire, selfish ambition. It is that energy that is standing in the whole of the human temple, which is the temple of God. That serpent turns into a snake in front of the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh calls forth 2 other snakes, and that serpent consumes them. That is because when you hold righteousness and you hold that the will of God, the true compassionate God, is going to be your master through forgiveness, through fasting, not eating once a day, but fasting for prolonged periods where you overcome the flesh, where you say no to the natural avatar of the body that's experiencing the fallen world, so as the soul can remind the body who is in charge. That is the energy in your spine. It is the energy of the 7 endocrine glands, and if you waste it in perversion, in anger, in malice, in sexual immorality, in gluttony, if you keep burning this energy up for selfish desire, for the pursuit of pleasure based upon your memories or the anticipation of it in the future, when that energy falls, it will consume you. But when you hold it and it is righteous and strong, that energy will consume the lower energy, the falling energy. Later in the story of Moses, he holds a bronze serpent on top of a staff. And he says to the Israelites who are being destroyed, killed, bitten by snakes, he says, "Look upon my bronze serpent on this staff and you will be saved." It is not a purely historical event, it's a mystical event. And indeed it's true, look upon the bronze serpent is live by the Spirit. To be bitten by the snakes is to live by the flesh. And so, inside this story of Moses, the staff again is held high, and the armies are battling, and if Moses' staff falls, his side loses. Because if man loses control of his nobility, his righteousness, his connection with spirit, his energy will fall, and when it falls, he feels discomfort and a void, and when he feels this discomfort, Satan is there to offer him temptation to try and escape that void. Whereas he must be a warrior, he must stop eating when he feels that discomfort, start praying, and fill himself with the presence of spirit, which is symbolically in this story represented as that bronze serpent, as your body fills back up with vitality. Instead of chasing after well-being and inner peace through pleasure again, as Satan will offer you. You need to build that energy up symbolically. You need to be with the Spirit of our Creator, the divine will. This is why if the staff falls, the enemy army wins. Satan wins if your vitality falls into the perversions. The Pharaoh, as they leave, decides to chase them down, as the ego will. The ego will wrestle you every day of your life. This lower ego that has its pleasures, its desires, bottomless pit of human desire. It chases from the lower self Moses, who is the soul awareness, taking the human life into the promised land of God's will and God's light. But Moses must cross the Red Sea, again raising his staff. By raising that energy, you cross the Red Sea. What is the Red Sea? Mystically red, always, and this is a coded language that's documented, and you cannot ignore that it's there, it's documented. Red was emotion. So we must mature spiritually, and emotion should not be that which governs our heart. No doubt many of those who have committed these atrocities were doing it in the name of vengeance, as they had women, children, friends, family who had died in bombings. And because they allowed unforgiveness and that difficult road of unforgiveness to take a hold of them, they lived from emotion. But God doesn't guide us through emotion. People think that love is emotion. Love is the presence of God, and it's not an emotion. It's beyond that. Love without condition is an awakening into a space and a place. And so Moses, the soul awareness, leading the human life, the Israelites, must part emotion and bring the human beyond the impulse of its emotion. And emotion will always consume the ego, the Pharaoh, and so it did when the Red Sea closed in on him. Now Moses must continue to where? The promised land flowing with milk and honey. When you meet the 7 sisters, when your energy is high, when the bronze serpent is that which you gaze upon, the vitality within you has risen through the 7, the temple of God, and reaches the center of the temple of God, where it is passed into the pituitary and the pineal, which is the anatomical movement inside you which connects you to the higher mind and the love and compassion of God, and they secrete DMT and serotonin. DMT is amber, honey-like, and serotonin is milky, white. The land flowing, promised land flowing with milk and honey, an internal movement. Now this is not isolated. This is really not isolated. If we take a look at the Quran, that which Hamas is certain that they understand, it is said that Muhammad, who clearly had a mystical experience, travelled on the Barak, which is a white horse-type creature, travelled through the 7 heavens, and then met Allah. And eventually, after an exchange and discussion with Moses as well, they agreed after many times that they would pray 5 times a day. Here we have numbers and a mystical experience. The 7 heavens are the 7 endocrine glands of the temple of God, the 7 energy centers of the temple of God. He traveled through the 7, and then he met with the presence of God. He heard God by arriving in the heights of the temple, the human body. He had overcome his 5 senses to achieve that. The overcoming of the 5 senses ensured that he could hear Allah, hear God. Inside Christianity, Jesus is crucified at the age of 33. He is crucified in Golgotha. Golgotha means the place of the skull. Christ was wounded 5 times on the cross. The 5 senses were overcome. The 33 of Jesus' age symbolically can point at the 33 vertebrae of the human body, the 7th heaven being at the end of the 33rd vertebrae. The Christ in you, the rising of that spirit within you, must come to the top of the temple by overcoming the 5 senses and being crucified, elevated in power in the skull. Jesus must live 33 years and be crucified in Golgotha, the place of the skull, where he was no longer man but Christ, where you are no longer man, governed by your flesh but Christ. Inside the Surah 18, I believe it is, the story of the cave. The cave is an inward place. When man goes inward, he overcomes his flesh. He finds discipline over the impulses of the body. Surah 18, 7 go inside the cave, but they had a dog with them. Around the world, these mystic codexes used culturally relevant symbols, and unfortunate for the dog was used to represent the lower nature inside the Islamic faith. It is why the angel Gabriel will not enter somebody's house in the Quran, I believe, or in a surah, because there is a puppy under the bed. There is a dog under the bed, and the angel says, I can't enter if there's a dog there. This is not compassion, this is not love. Am I more loving than an angel? I think not. But what it means is that you will not hear the messages of an angel if some of your lower nature, as this symbolically references, is present in your house, in your temple. Your lower nature must not be there, even in a small crumb, to hear the will of the divine and the guidance of the angelic. So the 7 go into the cave, but they leave the dog outside. To find the unity, to know the presence of Allah, to know the presence of God, to know the divine will, which I call Christ above all things, as Jesus' message was profoundly more clear, I feel, in its essence of the Creator's way, the Creator's hope, and the Creator's power of love and compassion and healing. Those 7 went inside to know God. You go inward, as Jesus said, "Woe unto the lawgivers, for they take away the key to the kingdom, for they do not enter within." The 7 go in, and the lower nature is left outside. This results, as I say, in this promised land flowing with milk and honey, the temple of God. In the middle of your brain is a gland called the pineal. It is there where true divine revelation will come to you. Unfortunately, if you live in the lower qualities of the flesh, in your anger, your malice, your vengeance, your jealousy, whatever it may be, if you live in that state where you are owned by revenge and wrongdoing and your perversions, etc., you may access that pineal and hear Satan. We are all accessing it. It in and of itself is not demonic. The reason people think it's demonic, as people enter this new age state of spirituality where there's no morality, there's no hey, there is something wrong with sin, stuff you can do to hurt one another, and they elevate their energy in yoga, in meditation, and they are living a life which is completely unholy. And when they do, they meet with the demonic realm, for they activated and used their pineal to connect to a spiritual dimension that has its fingers in the perversion of the everyday life of that human. In the Bible, Jacob wrestles with an angel, and that angel dislocates his hip, and the hip is the lower nature of man. After this, he says, "I have seen God face to face, and I call that place pineal." Lower nature is under control. You save up the energy of your life to serve the will of your Creator. You will see God face to face, anatomically, through the divine inspiration that arrives in what is being called the seat of the soul, the pineal. This is a story that shows us unity, and we have division all around the world. Complete division away from this. As Jesus said, "Let your eye be single and your whole body will fill with light," the light of God. When Jacob is finished there, he goes to see his brother Esau, and if you know your scripture, he bows 7 times, denoting that the unity of the 7, the temple of God, is in control of spirit once again. If you look at the story of Jericho, guys, this is endless. In the story of Jericho, you have the cherubim angels, and the cherubim wings stretch over the Ark of the Covenant. And in Jericho, they march around the walls of Jericho 7 times before they collapse and the fire starts. If you understand the human brain, you'll see that the cherubim wings are much like the cerebrum. And so, the Ark of the Covenant, the cerebrum of the brain, are the cherubim, mystically speaking. And so they had to march around the walls of Jericho 7 times to show the temple of God is back under the control of the divine will, of the Christic energy. The temple has risen to the energy of the human life, the soul essence, is here at the top of the temple where the cherubim are, the cerebrum. This is an ancient and profound wisdom that didn't belong to those cultures. This is another worldly wisdom and intelligence. And yet we have missed it. We have completely missed it. And this intelligence that we ourselves have only just started to attain was coded there to try and protect our species for those with eyes to see. Inside the Bible, the tribe of Judah camps in the east. The east is where the sun rises, and they were called the tribe of light. It says their number is 186,000 fourscore. That's 186,400. Up until recently, every textbook in the human story said that 186,400 meters per second is the speed of light in a vacuum. They had wisdom and information that far exceeded what our pastors and preachers and our imams, etc., are teaching us. And it's no injustice to say that our mosques, our churches and our temples might have missed something here, for we are reaching a time as a species where we can finally begin to piece that back together as we've become seemingly scientifically advanced enough to start seeing these clues, these connections inside these scriptures. And so the whole cause of this war, the whole cause of this persistent demonic attack on humanity, is that we are not yet understanding how to transform the temple of the human body, the temple of God, into the hands of the divine will. And we are trying to understand mystical texts from a prison of our dualistic mind. And remember, the dualistic mind was given to us by Satan. Even in these other faiths, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is the story of the beginning of all life. Adam has a rib separated from him to start the multiplication of life. If you split an electron from an atom, you start the multiplication of all life. In that story, they lived in unity, where thought was not their master, but faith and connection with the divine will. As the child of God, as a child of God, this was their way of life. And this is a place we can re-enter. We can live from there again. But in there, Satan came, somehow symbolically, leading them into self-consciousness and duality. And we have taken people who have transcended duality into the presence of the divine will, have written about it and coded things within there, and we have taken ourselves in a dualistic stance, listened to dualistic teachers who do not know how to bring that supernatural love. They tell you that you should, but they don't know how to access it. You see, we don't know love, most of us. We think we do. I love my child unconditionally. Then okay, if I take that very same child that you love without condition and put them in another family, and you hadn't met them, when you meet them on the street, is it true? And therefore the condition of your love was relationship. But there is a love, a force and energy of profound power and creation that we can move into, and it truly does love. And I've had mystical experiences where I questioned my validity as a father, as I couldn't define the love I held for other people around me over the love I held for my family and children. Because this is the love of Christ. It does not condition based upon internal separation of thought. Separation will always cause conflict. And that's why those who say that God is a belief, that awakening is a belief, they are living as thought as the number one priority, as an operating system for their life. And the mystical beyond it is so far disconnected from their reality that they can't understand why anyone would say that you can rule the world, as it were, or let your life be ruled through a different system than thought and analysis. I am not demonizing the use of analyzing and thought and technology. But what I am saying is that there is a still small voice beyond your own self-image and your own persistent analysis of reality. And if you fast and if you pray, that still small voice, which belongs to the Almighty Creator, will lead you into a compassionate way of life. And as I said earlier, never forget that nothing beats compassion. It sits silently above all things. But compassionate right action is the only goal of the walk with Christ. And the only way we can alter any of that is to truly raise our children in an education system which is very clear. You are in a fallen world, and there are demonic influences here that simply want to extract energy from us and make us suffer and have fear and torment and struggle so they can generate that energy. Satan has one goal: to have his own kingdom. So let's look at that word, Satan. Satan points at one who wishes to rebel against the kingdom of God. Those who wish to walk with Christ, as an example, in the path of Yeshua, is to unite with the divine will. We cannot be so immature by now in our modern day development to say, if there are fallen angels, there are interdimensional beings, that they are not technological. Why, when we have utilized technology, would they not utilize technology that we can't grasp? Technology that's from a spiritual realm that we can't comprehend. But you would need to fuel that kingdom. And one of the most, the only endless source of energy that we know is the generous heart of God pouring forth all creation and including in their infinite potential and free will. Our children must be raised to understand when they wake up on a morning, you are in a fallen world and your body has an enemy within it. And the enemy within your body will try to drag you into the world and away from your God. In the same manner that this 3D reality has dragged your soul into it. If you raise your children that way and you dominate education with the notion that we must find a way to transcend our undisciplined, violent, emotional, aggressive nature, there you will find that coded in the Torah, in the Quran, in Christianity, is the map that is man's freedom. And Jesus told you about it as well. He said you must walk by spirit and not by the flesh. You must not walk by the fallen, enslaved technology of the human body and the issues that it has. And you must walk by the soul awareness, the spirit, as the master of that body. And the soul awareness must know and feel and hear the will of God. Not as a belief. I'm talking about something way beyond belief. And if I could do anything today as a man, if you said to me, what would you do to try and change all of these people from the inside out? For that is the only way we are going to bring an end to Satan destroying, to us destroying one another at the suggestion and behest of Satan and the turmoil of the avatar that we experience the fallen world within, that fallen meat suit that we are inhabiting. I would say this: let me take every world leader, everyone of any religious leadership as well, and let me fast them for 40 days and 40 nights with no food, only water. And in that space, in the same manner that people like Pythagoras would not teach someone until they had done it, the human vessel transforms as finally all of the garbage inside of you that makes you toy with the notion that you are just a body and a mind, and you are not a soul that has been brought into this dimension and experiencing reality, and yet you have a home beyond here. All of that garbage goes away. I know because I did it. And there you begin to receive revelation, not through analysis or your own steam or intelligence, but through the awakening of the Christ energy inside all of us. In other words, I would ensure that these human beings were born into the presence of the divine will. And fasting is turning away from the 3D reality, the fallen world, and saying, I don't believe that you are all of it. I don't believe that everything I am seeing here is the be-all and end-all. I am certain there's something more to this. And as you do that, you begin, even Jesus had to fast, to overcome the illusion, as Buddha called it, of Maya, or as Jesus called it, of the fallen world. For the God, the ruler of this world, is Satan. You don't even know when this world fell, symbolically what that means. Could Satan have created his own parallel environment where he can drag souls in and torment them and make them suffer and leave those souls doing heinous things that are contrary to the origin and the unity of love where they are from? Are you there in such a simulated reality? You don't know. But you could be, and only a fool will tell you that you are not. This conflict will never stop until you take the head of the snake away. And the head of the snake is overcome when humanity finds its way to the seventh heaven, where humanity lives a righteous and holy life and says, my own personal desires are secondary to storing my energy up so as the will of God can show me the direction for my life. And I am not talking about praying and hearing nothing in return. I'm talking about God synchronizing a future for you, speaking to you with visions, with clear-audible connection. I'm talking about the living God, the God that here and now can guide your life. And those who are too arrogant to connect to there will say, I'm not sure I believe. The one who wishes to believe or not believe, if you can find your way around that, you will find the living God. For the living God is present within you. And it is only a self-image, which is a complete illusion based in thought and memory, that forces you to not recognize that you are that loving awareness. And that loving awareness of that original creator is the same loving awareness looking at you through the light of the eyes of a child or another human being. And therefore when you go to rape another human or to murder another human, you will look them in the eye and recognize, as you recognize yourself as that loving awareness, that they too are that loving awareness. And therefore, how can I do this to myself? How can I do this to my own children? Because this is what you are doing. When you murder another or rape another or whatever you do to them, you do it to yourself and to your children, and you do it to God directly. And it grieves God to see this pain and suffering, all based around scriptures that thankfully some angelic force did leave a map within, and now we just wait. We wait for a time that we are spiritually mature enough to let go of our arrogance and say, could it be for thousands of years we missed something? Something that unifies us into the presence of God and stops these conflicts that have no necessity anymore, that don't help our future. But if you want to stop external conflict, you have to stop external separation. And if you want to stop separation and conflict externally, you must stop it internally. And if you are going to stop it internally, you have to see that here and now, when you can be aware lovingly of the world without any thoughts about it, without any labels and descriptions about it, if you can just be lovingly aware of this moment, you enter a unified state with spirit, and there the supernatural begins to take place in your life. Now, if you start trying to organize it with your thoughts, trying to label it, you will feel the separation take place. And when that separation comes, you guarantee it can only lead to conflict with self and other. My heart breaks for what I'm seeing there. And my heart breaks for those who follow religions with leaders who are simply not mature enough to admit that maybe there's more to it. They're here and it's awesome and they're trying to lead people, many of them, to good. But man of his own steam and his own thought-based identity and the tools of the fallen state cannot be good enough. But man who surrenders those tools for a new operating system, the Christ, the Christic way, can, which means compassion, that brave, powerful compassion that sits silently above everything. My love, my condolences, my heartfelt hope for peace, for those in Israel and Palestine, and for those around the world who have been drawn into celebrating the hand of Satan, polluting their religions. No matter if someone is oppressed or not, if you think the solution is to rape and murder, you are part of the problem, because you haven't woke up to the simple truth that you are in a fallen world, in a fallen body, and you can't get out of it on your own. You need that presence of the divine will of Christ through the grace of God, through your surrender to God's grace and God's will to save you. Your sins are forgiven. Can you forgive the sins of others? If people can truly be transformed by that message, the new Christic world begins. God bless. And to all who are oppressed, all who suffer, all who die without need today and every day, may God be with them, and may our species find itself in the truth of its scriptures that exists way beyond the religious indoctrination that most of us are living out. God bless, guys.